First up is Elvis, which is the Elvis Presley biopic. It's directed by Baz Luhrmann, and I am not a big Baz Luhrmann person. I think my favorite film of his is probably Strictly Ballroom, which tells you, given where his career has gone versus where it started, Elvis is more in line with his later works. And yeah, so I think the big thing about this film is that it's fine. It really relies on the strength of the music to me. And I think working with music is something that Baz Luhrmann is pretty good at. As much as I didn't like Moulin Rouge, I thought his use of popular music in it was creative. So Elvis, obviously you have some of the best source material there is to work with. The strange thing about the film is that it is sort of told through the lens of Colonel Tom Parker, who was Elvis's manager. He's played by Tom Hanks, who was doing, his best sort of Bobo Dracula impression. I think Tom Parker was Dutch. Supposedly this is not a very accurate representation of Tom Parker's voice, but it is strange to have a movie about Elvis where Elvis doesn't actually necessarily feel like he's making the decisions in it that drive the film forward. I think that was possibly intentional, but the way it is presented doesn't work for me. Like, Elvis is a passenger in his own movie, but you've called the movie Elvis, so I know Austin Butler is getting a lot of praise for this role. I think he's fine. I think we've seen a lot of people take on this role and do a decent job. He works a lot better as young Elvis than he does as later Vegas Elvis for understandable reasons. It is hard to age someone. Also, speaking of looks and etc., the prosthetics they have Tom Hanks in are truly something else. I just look it up. It's that should tell you the quality level where we're at. So I think the things that do work the best about the movie are the music. There's some fun remixes. Obviously, Elvis's music is catchy. The thing I had forgotten that I think this film tries to delve into a little bit, but doesn't go there enough for me, is that, Elvis was really a cover artist. He took a lot of his music from black artists and then, put his white face on it and repackaged it, and obviously his voice is good, all these things, but he didn't write his own music, which is something I think a lot of us forget. He's possibly the greatest cover artist of all time. He's also one of the greatest solo selling artists of all time. But I think this movie tries to acknowledge more of the source of his songs and eventual success than other projects have. But to me, like, the real story I want to be is, like, how these people were essentially screwed over by, this process. I do think Elvis had some involvement in civil rights and maybe, like, a tiny bit of progression there, but the movie doesn't focus on that. It's a 2-hour, 40-minute movie. You had time to focus on those things. I don't know why we just kind of sort of shuttle back and forth between concerts, and then Tom Hanks manipulating things behind the scenes, and then Austin Butler trying to do Elvis. It's just, I think if this movie had been a tight 2 hours, I think it would have been a lot better for me. But the reason that you go to this movie is the same reason probably that anyone, royal you, continue to go to Vegas Elvis impersonator shows, is that there is something about the way that Elvis sings, and Austin Butler apparently does do the singing in this, and I think he does a good job of giving the vibe of Elvis. But, that will probably continue to be a driving force for many, many more years to come. I don't think his legacy is necessarily going anywhere. I don't know if Elvis the film adds anything in particular to his legacy. I don't know if it takes away, presenting Tom Parker as this villainous character in his life. It's like, all right, well, we've already hit the point where Elvis has been sort of put on a pedestal and shrined up. And, so why are you trying to tell us, like, yes, this was why he had darker days? Like, we know already, and we've moved past that. I also have to flag, I know it is part of their history, but the whole Priscilla Presley, thing, she 10 years younger than him when they met. She was 14, he was 24. There's no world in which that's okay. And the movie tries to sort of gloss over that or show them a little bit later and all these things, but I don't know if it glorifies it, but at no point does any character go like, hey, buddy, like, should you be? And maybe that's not how it went down in real life. I think, actually, to sum it all up, one of the things and challenges of this movie is that it feels like it was sanitized. And it's the same problem that something like Bohemian Rhapsody had with Freddie Mercury's portrayal, or even Rockin' Man to a degree, where Elton John, I think, was willing to be more vulnerable with the story they were telling, but you can tell the Presley estate has been all over the Elvis film, and there's an approved, like, we can only go so far into his demons, and then that's the line. Same went for Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody, like, not even fully acknowledging that, like, Freddie Mercury was just gay. There's no beating around that bush. But anyway, I think the sanitization of it takes away from it. I think the runtime takes away from it. I think if you're a big Elvis fan, you're going to have a great time, right? If you are on the fence about it, maybe consider waiting till it's out on some sort of, I think it'll be on HBO Max relatively quickly. I personally am going to give it 3.6 out of 5. And then the next film I have is called Mr. Malcolm's List. It is basically like an amalgamation of all those sort of Regency, Jane Austen type books presented in a script form. I didn't realize that apparently it had actually been a short, which was from the same writer-director combo. Emma Hawley-Jones is the director. The writer is Suzanne Elaine. And there are things I liked about this movie. It quotes colorblind casting, and that meaning, there's somebody who is Asian who plays the mother of a black woman. It stars, I should go back to who it stars. It stars Frida Pinto, Sope Dirisu, Oliver Jackson-Cohen, Ashley Park, Zoe Ashton, Theo James, and Naoko Mori. And, it's the same story that we've seen over and over. Basically, Sope plays Mr. Malcolm, who is a man with an estate and an income and allowance and blah, blah, blah. And, he's looking for his perfect bride or match or whatever. And he has a list. And if women don't meet up to it, it's basically Mr. Darcy, right? It's Mr. Darcy. And then there's a whole complicated side plot where Zoe Ashton plays a socialite-esque, I can't remember what the British equivalent of, that time is, but an eligible bachelorette who feels spurned by him, and then she concocts this elaborate scheme to humiliate him back and enlists her friend, played by Frida Pinto. So, again, I think the thing I liked the most about this was just sort of the truly committing to the colorblind casting, and a lot of the times, I've talked about this repeatedly, colorblind casting does not include Asian people, and so the fact that there are Asian people in this made me so happy. Apparently, the short had Gemma Chan, and I'm sad that she didn't make it into this one. I'm going to assume it's because she was probably working on, Eternals or something and had another opportunity. I think that was probably a better role for her than this. At the end of the day, I think the biggest challenge I have with this film is that it is definitely derivative, which is not a blocker on its own, but I didn't feel any sort of passion or chemistry between any of the characters. You're supposed to, ship them, for lack of a better word, because there are protagonists, but I wasn't yes, these two belong together, and these two belong together, and oh no, they're star-crossed, what will happen? I also got the sense that, and this is the case with many of these films, or stories even, you will get a happy ending, and so I didn't feel a sense of stakes there. There were also some character choices that I was these people are monsters. Why would any of them be in the same social circle as friends, etc., etc.? I think if you are completely out of other adaptations and just looking to scratch that itch, that very chaste version of Bridgerton or Pride and Prejudice, that type of thing, yeah, this is fine. This is up your alley. But if you are looking for that sort of great passion, next original story in this realm, this is probably not going to be it for you. But I'm still going to give Mr. Malcolm's List 3.7 out of 5. And then the last film I have this week is Minions, The Rise of Gru. I don't know when I tapped out of this franchise. I think it was a little while ago, but this is apparently with very good reason. So one, I don't know. I mean, I guess it made sort of sense. The last one I definitely remember is Despicable Me, maybe Despicable Me 2. I haven't watched the Minions offshoots. Steve Carell is back as Gru, so there's your sort of thread between them. And this one is a prequel about Gru as a kid and his coming together with the Minions and rising to supervillain fame. And I don't know. The problem is it just sort of dumps you in and I guess expects you to either go, okay, this film is not going to be rocket science. We don't need to give you any backstory or context on who these things are or people. I don't know. Minions are people? Whatever. And then it also goes, okay, well, for kids, they're just going to go banana and be happy, right? That, to me, does not a movie make. And I feel like at this point, they shouldn't even be trying to insert the humans. And if you're going to do the cash grab, just stick it to the Minions. Because I think they're actually more fun when they're just sort of allowed to play and do their little ridiculous things. And, animation is a medium. It is not a genre. And therefore you should be holding animated films to the same integrity level that you hold other films. This is an animated film, I think, aimed at children. But I shouldn't, as an adult, I shouldn't be punished for seeing this as a reviewer. My entire career is punishment for myself. But anyway, so Steve Carell is Gru, and then you've got a super talented voice cast who feel so wasted in it. You've got this sort of crew of sinister, bad people with Taraji P. Henson, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Lucy Lawless, Dolph Lundgren, Danny Trejo, Russell Brand, Alan Arkin, and then Julie Andrews is briefly back, and then part of the reason for me, I was okay, maybe I'll consider watching this is because Michelle Yeoh joined this one. And then you can just feel the like Asia market money grab in it, where the beginning is just some weird, they just dump you into an Indiana Jones-esque but set in Asia setup, and then the movie just sort of tangents from there. I feel like this movie is like 80% training montages, which does not a movie make. If you want to make a bunch of dumb shorts that are Minions training or whatever it is, like fine, but don't pretend it's a feature with a cohesive story. So Michelle Yeoh plays some sort of kung fu master, which I have mixed feelings on that. Like before I would have been like, Michelle Yeoh can do no wrong. And now I'm like, oh, was this wrong? It felt like it was flirting with it. If you have little kids and you are so trapped and so tapped for content this weekend, yeah, you might have to go see this. I don't have a better recommendation for you on that front for like little kids. You are anybody else, I don't think this is for you. Even if you're a Minions fan, which I don't know if there's anything wrong with that inherently. I'm saying that with a rise to my voice, but yeah, Minions Rise of Gru I did not find it to have any sort of coherent, enjoyable aspects to it. So I'm going to give it 2.7 out of 5.